I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show, and this is Lizzy and the Triggermen.
It had to be you. It had to be you. I wandered around and finally found somebody who could make me be
Lizzy
true.
Shapiro is the lead singer of the 10-piece jazz band Lizzy and the Triggermen. When she launched her career in jazz, she could have started small with a jazz trio or quartet, but her mantra is go big or go home. Well, now she's doing both. As a native of Chelsea, Massachusetts, Lizzy is back in town performing with the Triggermen tomorrow night at City Winery, Boston. Thank you so much for joining us here at The Culture Show.
Thank you so much for having me. What a thrill.
Well, you go big in every regard, this seems. I mean, you just have launched into this and you've made it your own. As I was consuming your music and thinking about everything you've done, you're one part Eartha Kitt, one part Ella Fitzgerald, one part Amy Winehouse and Britney Spears. How have they all coalesced in you?
Okay, you have to do every introduction for me ever. Well, I thank you, first of all. I am deeply inspired by strong women. And I think that, swing music, which is the kind of music that we do, has been long a real wonderful platform for strong women. So that's really was my gateway in and who I fell in love with. So yeah, Eartha Kitt, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, and, even people like Judy Garland and Barbra Streisand, who did records with the Great American Songbook. It's long been a great platform for strong women.
What makes it that way?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think that the complexity of the songs, they're really interesting narrative songs that tackle the complexity of the human experience. Even though they're pop music, they're deep. And so I think that it takes a deep, complex person to translate that. And so it's one of the rare art forms I feel like that isn't afraid of, women who have lived a bit, who've aged, who are mature, that there's a patina that comes with time that I think this music needs and rewards.
How much of that is about what you're doing on the stage, essentially how you're owning the stage, literally in the spotlight?
Well, I mean, yeah, of course, that's part of the fun, right? It's an over the top. I mean, any kind of live performance allows you to be bigger than life. And as somebody who is naturally bigger than life, it's very awkward to express that part of myself in most day-to-day life, right? So I kind of need to have a platform like this to just sort of be me in all of my grandness. So yeah, and I think that spectacle is also part of what is really thrilling. There's an element of the human experience that just isn't subtle. And so you need big art to really convey that, for the audience to kind of feel like, oh yeah, I know that feeling, and to let it out themselves. There's something really visceral about swing music and cathartic about it, I think, for the audience.
Well, this is fascinating to know about your audiences, that they dress for you. This doesn't begin and end with your voice. You are all about the gowns and the performance and how you look, and they have started doing the same in response.
That has been one of the most beautiful, unexpected parts of this band is the audience shows up oftentimes more dressed up than I am. I mean, we have had people make gowns from scratch to show up to our shows. And what I love about that is that our audiences come as their alter ego. And I think everybody has that kind of superhero alter ego hidden inside of us. And again, there's so few outlets in modern society to really express that side of yourself, for grown-ups to just play pretend. And so what I love is that when you come to our shows, you get to meet these fabulous alter egos of not just me, because Lizzy is for sure my fabulous alter ego, but of everyone there. And there's a real vulnerability in that that's beautiful.
You have a guy in your band, Dan Barrett, who performed with Benny Goodman.
Yes.
First of all, what's it like to be performing with somebody who performed with Benny Goodman? And he must just be deliriously happy with this experience.
Dan is an absolute genius, in my opinion. And he played with Benny Goodman as a lead trombone in his last orchestra when he was actually very young. And it's utterly terrifying to perform with him because he's played with legend after legend after legend, and he's a legend himself. But also that's the kind of terrifying that makes you bring your A game. And I've always believed as an artist, surround yourself with the best so that you have to level up. So yeah, it's a thrill, and he is really enjoying it, and it's a really fun kind of musical marriage between him and me. I think that he brings this wealth of musicology. I mean, I don't know anybody who knows more music from that era than he does. And then I'm kind of, in a way, a bit of a younger outsider who's trying to bring things from a modern perspective. And so I think it's been a fun kind of push and pull that ultimately has resulted in something really cool.
We're speaking with Lizzy Shapiro. She'll be performing tomorrow night at City Winery, Boston, with her band Lizzy and the Triggermen. I want to play another piece of your music. This is where we start to see some of your comedy and your edge come in.
But Adam was a simple man, content to sit and pray. For Eve was bought out of a garden and started to dismay. She went to God and cried, we're clearly not a fit. Did you make me from his funny bone? Cause the man has zero wit.
You have this great background, too. We're going to talk about your opera in a second, but the comedy background. So, again, this is part of this fusion that I alluded to at the outset of the interview.
Yeah. So I spent about a decade doing comedy in Hollywood, in film and TV. And so that song that you just played is one of our original tunes. It's actually the first song I ever wrote for the band. And it's called Eve's Lament. And it is a retelling of the Adam and Eve story from Eve's perspective. And I love the clip that you chose because lyrically that's some of the lyrics I'm most proud of. But yeah, I mean, essentially that song is about a woman who is stuck in this paradise that wasn't designed for her. It was designed for him. And she's trying to find happiness and sort of begging God to make some just adjustments, right? But ultimately finding that her and Adam really are not her thing.
How much did women, we certainly know of the strong women singers, you named some of them from that period, but how much agency did they have? Did they have as much freedom as you have to write the songs and perform the songs that you want to perform today?
That's a good question. I'm not sure is the answer, but I'm sure that I have more freedom now than they probably did, and certainly most of the composers of swing music are male. And I think that opens up this really fun lane to be able to create music that's deeply inspired by that era, but also brings a modern and often, very female perspective. Part of what I love about swing music is that it's born out of tough times, and it isn't afraid to tackle really serious subjects, but then kind of wraps them in this really catchy swinging groove that makes you move and makes you dance and recharges your spirit. And so it's this perfect vehicle to actually tackle things that are kind of tough and sensitive. And, so I've found a real catharsis in tackling, some of the frustrations of being a woman in modern society. I joke, but like my main artistic muse is sublimated female rage.
There you have it.
But it's a good one, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Adele's got Heartbreak, and I've just got,
Let's talk about opera. So not only do you have this comedy background, but you spent years studying opera. That led you to this moment. How the transition? Why the transition?
Yeah, so I started studying opera actually in Charlestown, Massachusetts, with Richard Conrad and Ellen Chickering, and it was wonderful, amazing training. Unfortunately, one day I had to come to the sobering realization that I wasn't going to get to sing the great tubercular heroines that I was dreaming of playing, where you sing the high note and drop dead. Instead, I was more likely facing a career of Mozart shepherdesses, which just didn't quite scratch the itch. the same way. So I actually quit singing for about a decade because I had this very kind of old-fashioned voice, and I didn't really know how to recontextualize it once I stepped away from opera. And so I just stopped singing, because I'm sure anybody who's been on a pro track for something knows it's really depressing to turn that into a hobby. So I just stopped, and I did film and TV for about a decade. And then my dear friend asked me to sing a song for her 1920s themed wedding. And I picked this tune that's pretty obscure called "If You Want the Rainbow, You Must Have the Rain." It ended up pouring rain at her wedding. So this song ended up being really poignant. And I had this kind of field of dreams moment, this like light bulb go on over my head, where I realized, oh my God, this is the kind of music that I need to be doing. This is what works with my voice. Of course, I had no idea how to put together a vintage big band, you know? So I had this really serendipitous, crazy thing happen shortly after the wedding. I was sitting on a subway car around midnight. I wasn't even supposed to be on that car, but that's a whole other story. In a terrible mood. And I look over, and the guy sitting right next to me has handwritten sheet music on his lap. And on the top is written, "If you want the rainbow, you must have the rain." Yes.
Oh my goodness.
No, seriously. So I looked at the guy and I was like, this is an obscure song. Even for jazz musicians, obscure song. I was like, how do you know this song? And he's like, how do you know this song? And I was like, I'm a singer and I want to put together a vintage jazz band, but I don't know how to do it. And he gave me his card and he said, I never do this, but I feel like I'm supposed to help you. Call me and I will. And that was Ed Pulser, who's an unbelievable jazz musician based in New York and New Orleans.
I'm speechless. I mean, this is an extraordinary story.
Right? Isn't that?
But and even before you got to that climax of that story, I was thinking that I often hear this from artists. There are the signs that put you there. I mean, do you believe that you're doing what you're intended to do?
Yeah, I do. But I also have a certain, I don't have any expectations for what the future holds. I really gave up singing. I really came to terms with the idea that I wasn't going to have a career in music at all. And so having now a career in music, everything has felt in a way kind of like gravy, you know? And so I just feel grateful for every opportunity.
Well, that is a fabulous way to look at it. Best of luck with your show tomorrow night and being with your family. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Lizzy Shapiro is the lead singer of Lizzy and the Triggermen, a 10-piece jazz band. They'll be performing tomorrow night at City Winery, Boston. The show starts at 7:30. To learn more, go to citywinery.com/Boston. Thank you for listening to another edition of The Culture Show. Tune in tomorrow. Co-hosts Callie Crossley, Edgar B. Horwick III, and I will be at our GBH studio at the BPL with our Arts and Culture Week in Review. Come visit us as we discuss how Lizzo quit and then unquit. And women were so good at taking over March Madness that they've made for April Madness. If you ever miss us live here on the radio, be sure to check out our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jared Bowen. Have a great day.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.